I'm Scott Sommer. I've been practicing holistic medicine for more than 20 years. Our philosophy with this podcast is combining ancient wisdom with modern research to help you protect and heal your family so you can thrive in today's world and the challenges that we're faced with on a daily basis. Hello, everyone. Scott Sommer here. I'm so excited to be able to share this podcast with you, which is really about the food disease pipeline. Have you really thought about the difference of a person who's overweight, struggling with their mental clarity, can't sleep at night, and maybe has diabetes, heart disease, cancer? How can food really change their body? Or what type of food or lifestyle led to this problem? Maybe you are one of those people that are just struggling. You're not where you want to be. You don't think clearly. And you don't have clear skin. And maybe you just don't have the ability to do things you want to do. You're in chronic pain. Whatever that might be, there really is this food disease pipeline connection, which we're going to talk about the farm, which is where it all starts. And the three problems that I see is how we cultivate our food, number one. Number two is how we process our food and how it's engineered. Can you believe that? It's unbelievable, but we'll talk more about this. And three is how it's distributed. How much we receive through media about what to do with food, which food to buy. We are greatly influenced by commercials and billboards and everything else around us. So let's begin. Let's begin with the state of the farm, So it all starts at the farm, and so that really hits home for me because I grew up on a farm. My dad had 5 acres out in Elk Grove, and on that land he grew fruit trees and animals and different vegetables. And so I know what a farm should be. And then my grandmother is the other example of this analogy, if you will, where she used to take the food as grandma, is the analogy or the example in our society of culture. She used to be the healer of our society, where she would take the food from the farm and then create this delicious, most amazing soups and meals, for us to heal and to stay healthy and well. So as we talk about cultivation of food, it's important to understand that over the last 100 years, things have really changed. We have problems with seed. Seed is GMO, manufactured in a factory, in a laboratory. And so this seed is GMO, which affects our health. It's not the same seed. And it's also not the same variety of seed. We grow seed for profit, not for people. And so when we grow seed for profit, basically people suffer because they don't get a variety of seed that we used to have. We used to have over 400 varieties of tomatoes, and now we have maybe 40 to 80 different varieties of tomatoes. On the farm, we also used to cultivate the soil. We used to do composting, and now we put chemicals like 3 major nutrients into the soil so that plants will continue to grow, to look great, but have no nutritional value. So my dad used to say that plants are only as good as the soil that they're grown upon. Soil should have 90 nutrients and minerals in the soil. And now they only have basically 3. So we are basically just robbing the soil and robbing the land and the earth of its nutrient value and only putting back a few cents back into it. Instead of regrowing and replenishing, we are robbing. And so with that said, if you start growing food as we do today with GMO, these are the types of seeds and foods that will cause cancer, digestive disorders, infertility in people. And this is leading to tremendous amounts of disease. So the other problem with food is that the way we used to grow food is that the seeds and the soil were so healthy that the plants were healthy enough to repel critters, pests, and Also to repel weeds. Weeds have always been around for centuries, but they were able to weeds differently. Like they would weed by hand, making sure that the plants had healthy environment around them and the healthy soil, so they would grow to their fullest potential. And there are many, many more farmers working by hand, which was a different aspect than today. And so they basically didn't have to use chemicals. They just had to rely on pulling the weeds. And companion planting is where they plant other plants together, like marigolds and tomatoes are a great combination, companion planting, which allows us to, the marigolds actually repel bugs and attract good bugs such as ladybugs and grass and other types of beneficial bugs, which help get rid of insects, which would be harmful to, say, a tomato plant. However, today's chemicals are used more than ever. And plants, sometimes like apples, are sprayed multiple times, like sometimes up to 14 to 20 times they're sprayed during a growing up to harvest season. They're sprayed so many times that they just infect the apple with these chemicals. And when a person eats these apples, you cannot wash the chemicals off. So we've got chemicals used today which are so different than where we didn't have chemicals in the past, even in the past 40, 60 years. These chemicals are full of heavy metals. They cause cancer. They can't really be washed off of food. And they exist in the food itself. So if you're eating conventional food that's sprayed, that's non-organic, it really means that they're nutrient deficient, full of chemicals. So would you ever stop and spray chemicals on your salad just because you were fearful of a bug being in the salad? Of course not, because you know that would be dangerous for your body and your liver and lead to serious problems. And so these are other aspects. And of course, the chemicals sprayed for herbicides to kill weeds like Roundup have gotten into 95% of all streams, lakes, and rivers in the world. And it's causing all kinds of disease and problems on our liver and causes cancer. So who wants cancer, right? So, and then finally, with all of this said, once we understand that everything starts in the soil to the seed, it was really, farms were totally different because it was a community effort. Where in the past, my dad, I remember growing up on the farm, basically my grandmother would take the food that my dad would, grow, and she would take that food and she would preserve it and, feed us the food, which would give us nutrients and energy. And so it was just this prosymbiotic relationship between the soil that my dad would cultivate, the seeds that he would choose, and the way that he would grow the food healthily and with great care and love. And then he would give that food as he would pick it to my grandmother to prepare it for us as a family. And we would get the healthiest, natural, most abundant, vitality-rich food possible. In today's world, that doesn't happen. We have a farmer on a tractor growing food for thousands of people in an air conditioning unit in his tractor as he's disconnected from the earth instead of touching the earth and working with the soil. And then when we, works the tractor with the chemical fertilizers and chemical pesticides and herbicides, that there's a lack of worms in the soil anymore. And there's a lack of nutrients in the soil because he's putting only 3 nutrients back into the soil. There's a lack of soil composites, which feed the bacteria. So it's basically a stripped soil of no life. and which is totally different than the farm that I grew up on. I remember just smelling the soil as the wind would blow, as my dad would work the tractor and work the soil. The smell of the soil, the richness of the food, and how it gave us all life. That life came from the soil, from the ancient ways of cultivation and the true value of the farm. So that's really the way it used to be. How Grandma and Grandpa was the farmer. Grandma would prepare the food and take the food and turn it into something valuable for the family to eat, to stay healthy, alive, and live a healthy, long, happy life. I remember once I had an experience with a GMO tomato. I had grown plants in a garden every year for many years, along with my dad's garden. Once I grew my own garden growing up and had my own house, I had great success in growing food and always enjoyed that. Until one day I had gotten this GMO tomato plant, but it didn't look like the other plants. Not only it didn't smell, it didn't have the same smell as a tomato plant does, and it just didn't taste right. In fact, I got sick that night. I made a salad, and it really upset my stomach. And I ended up just chopping the plant down and digging it up and throwing it away because I realized that it was GMO. It was the one plant that was different than all the rest. So we have to realize that GMO greatly affects our cells, our DNA. When something is modified, it will modify our own body and our own cells and our own DNA. So this is a very dangerous concept of farming. And it has to do more with scientists in the laboratory than it has to do with growing food to give us health and wellness. The second problem we face is processed food and how it's engineered. So many times we don't realize what processed food is. But let's define the way food used to be. The food used to be you'd grow it on the farm, like we talked about, and you'd pick the food, and then you would just basically, there weren't stores. Stores were not available. Everyone had to grow their own food. And it was a whole food mentality, meaning that you would pick the squash and make squash for dinner. And you would pick the tomatoes and you make a salad, with maybe some salad dressing. But you left the tomato, you just sliced it into pieces. You made the lettuce that you grew and you put that into the salad. Everything was whole in its whole state. Unfortunately, processed food now is where we are. So processed food, the problem is that it's basically made by processing a food. Let's say wheat. You have whole wheat when you pick it from the field and you thresh it, is what it's called. And then you take this wheat and then you make a decision that you want to make whole wheat bread. So you grind it up and then you make it into bread. You put all the ingredients to make this bread. So that's a whole wheat, whole food bread that you could eat, slice it up, bake it, slice it up, and then eat it as bread. But then as processing began after World War II, which is the history of processing of food, people became more involved with, working outside the home, and they became less interested in farming because they really had to have somebody else grow their own food. So when that happened, the consumer, needed for their food to last longer because they were very busy with working and kids and all of that. And so they came up with ways to process food, which was to remove parts of the food as it existed in its whole food state. So an example is taking the wheat again. You pick it from the field and you remove the bran, it contains the oils, the wheat germ oil. That's the most valuable part of the wheat. Removing it so that the wheat doesn't go rancid and making white flour. So you remove the bran and the germ, which has all the vitamin E in it. And then you just make it into white flour and you bleach it. And so you end up with this processed white flour and make processed white bread. And then you put chemicals in, and then you know that the reason why they put synthetic vitamins back into the flour and into the bread was they realized that people would possibly get sick. Well, they definitely would get sick, and they wouldn't be able to come back to the store to pick up their next loaf of bread. So I always jokingly say that they have to put just enough pixie dust vitamins into the bread to keep people alive, to keep their customer alive, to keep buying the bread at the store and keep returning week after week. But not enough vitamins or the right vitamins in the whole food, which were really the best that existed in nature, that the Lord had provided us. But instead, everything is processed. So once you process things, processed food is lacking vitamins and nutrition value. It's also lacking fiber, which is a big problem in our diet, leading to colon cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and especially diabetes because we have these spikes of blood sugar spikes that exist because we don't have enough fiber like we did in the past in a whole food diet. And then the other thing, there's a lot of chemicals added to add flavors. As a UC Davis graduate, I studied nutrition and decided to switch from a pre-med major of biochemistry to nutrition. And doing so, I really became more aware of the chemicals put into food are just phenomenal. There are so many chemicals to color soft drinks, all the chemicals and sugars which destroy the brain, like fructose, from corn syrup, which is also GMO. So all of these processed foods originally came from something that was original, like corn or wheat, or what it might be, like apples turn into applesauce. And so that's really the definition. The problems with processed food is that it robs our bodies of nutrition because the food itself has been robbed and really pillaged, if you will, of the nutrients it originally had so that it can stay longer on the shelf. That's the purpose, for the seller to make more money so that it doesn't go bad on the shelves in the store. But unfortunately, who suffers are the people that get the disease from the lack of fiber, the lack of nutrition, and all the chemicals put back into food that weren't there in the first place. So for instance, red coloring number 5 is not a number 40, is really not a normal coloring that exists, but beets do have a natural red coloring that exists. And so if you use beet as a coloring, that would be different than if you use number 40, which is dangerous, causing ADHD in kids and leading to cancer as well. So this is the definition, and the problem with processed foods is that they really are like a robber. They take what they originally had from the food, and they leave you something that's subpar. It would be like asking somebody for a $100 bill and giving them pesos in return and thinking that it was an even exchange. So the third and last problem is distribution of food. And so when we think about it years ago, I just remember that my dad as a farmer would, share his food and he would distribute it to other people. And it was always inspiring, to see food that was so healthy looking that you wanted to cook it and you wanted to eat it and you wanted to bring it home and share it with your family. And that was the natural distribution. You also want, when you go to farmer's market, you just have the desire to cook more vegetables because that's what they sell, are vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds. So it's inspiring to see the farmer that grew the food and how he shares it with other people, and to hear his story of how he grew the crop of corn or the plums on the tree or how things went this year. So all of these are inspiring stories, for us to learn and understand. But unfortunately, today it doesn't work that way. We don't feel as inspired. We feel more, we're drawn in by addiction and by marketing. So this marketing starts on TV, And so from the time we're set in front of a television program, there are hundreds and thousands of commercials which tell us what to buy, from everything from fast food, going through the fast food, getting the burger, getting the shake, what's on sale, and how it's going to taste so delicious. And nothing about the fact that it's connected to disease because of this disease food pipeline. And but they just talk about, how great you're going to feel, how great it's going to taste, when you buy this burger. And then the other marketing is when you're in the store, even trying to go to the store to buy food, if you're not careful. And the outer limits of the store is always, vegetables and the healthiest foods possible are on the outside corners and edges of the store. But the traps are on the inside of the store, which most people shop, So they might get a couple vegetables and then they're drawn into the next aisle of cereal, which is eye level for kids, all full of sugary cereals, full of chemicals. And I remember as a kid, just thinking to myself, I just ate brown rice and whole grain cereal from its whole state, and not even knowing what it would be like to eat a sugary, sweet cereal that I saw on TV until I went to my friend's house and experienced the fact that they were eating colored cereal full of sugar and full of colorings. And it was just kind of a shocking event, to realize that they were eating so different than the whole food diet that I had been given by my parents, which I was so grateful for now, looking back. And so as you continue on through the store, we know that it's just a trap, through coloring and labels and marketing, and so many, the ingredients are written so small that you have no idea that the majority of it is sugar or coloring or chemicals. And it's not even really food. I mean, you don't have to put a label on an apple because it's an apple. A Fuji apple, as an example, is an apple. And there's nothing more to it. A sweet potato is a sweet potato. But there's so many benefits and nutrients that can be found in a whole food diet that you can't get in processed food, because processed food is always missing something, and it's always full of chemicals that you wouldn't get while eating whole foods on the farm. And the other part of marketing is this fast food really leads in closing to this fast food pipeline of disease, because we know that if we continue to eat this way as Americans, that we've seen the influence of this fast food pipeline in other countries, that countries that were once healthy, when they bring in McDonald's or Starbucks or these different fast food restaurants, that they actually bring the culture down. They create obesity, disease, diabetes, just like we have here in America, that they actually are able to duplicate the disease process by giving people the same kind of foods that we eat, and how that food greatly influences them and creates disease in their lives. And so this is really what we call the disease food pipeline. And I think that what it comes down to, the conclusion is that, how powerful is food to you? Do you believe that food has the potential to reverse disease, to resolve pain, to reverse cancer, and to improve your digestion, give you more energy, increase your sleep, and clear up your skin? Food has all the potential of all of those things that I mentioned and more. But, we've downgraded food, that food doesn't have the potential, and it's only because people are eating the wrong food. So the summary is, food either has the power to heal your body and sustain life for a long time, or it has the poison to poison your body over a long period of time, to slowly degrade your body and shorten your life. So remember to focus on the things that matter most. We must understand these three aspects, these three problems: how we cultivate food, how we process food and how it's engineered, and finally how it's distributed. So you have the choice because the power is in the plate. Each and every bite can lead you to health and wellness and vitality, or disease, suffering, pain, and an early death. So you decide based on the power in the plate in each and every bite that you take from this point forward for the rest of your life. So for now, I hope you learned something from today's podcast about the disease food pipeline. And I promise you, I have a testimony about food as medicine because I was born with epilepsy. And my dad taught me about farming and food and fitness. So farming and fitness. And those two things combined changed my life. It reversed disease in my body. And at age 15, I was cured of epilepsy. It was a miracle through food as medicine. And it also helped reverse disease in my grandfather's body, which was my mom's side of the family. And my dad taught him how to take care of himself in his 40s, how to eat and grow his own food, how to exercise daily, drink water on a regular basis, and change his lifestyle, such as taking a nap on a daily basis. And all of these things changed my grandfather's life, who lived well in his late 90s. My dad lived a long and prosperous life as well. And with all of this said, we can see that all of us were born sick. Myself, my dad, and my grandfather. But we all turned it around with food as medicine. Unfortunately, the other grandfather chose the other way, like the American people. The majority of people are eating the wrong food because it's processed, it's full of chemicals, and they're following all of the signs and all of the indicators of an addictive personality, where they are addicted to fast food, all the sugar, all the salt, all the MSG, and all the chemicals in the food, which causes them and draws them in each and every day to stop off after the office, through the drive-thru, because they don't have time to feed their kids a natural, healthy meal. Instead, they rely upon these chemical-infested, nutrient-deficient foods, which will lead to the disease food pipeline. So I hope you learned something. And by the way, the grandfather that I never met, he actually only lived to be about 50 years old, and he died early from a heart attack. Suddenly, my dad found him one morning, dead from a heart attack, because of the food choices that he made, from pizza, chow mein, Chinese food, and poor lifestyle changes. He made the wrong choices and ended up cutting his life short. So you have a choice. You can either choose poison or you can choose power. And the choice is yours because the power is in the plate. For now, take care, be well, and thrive.